In this video, we'll learn how to create a full-screen responsive landing page with HTML and CSS. So let's go ahead and check out the design before we get started. So as you can see on the right-hand side here, we have the mobile version of the Success full-screen landing page. So let's go ahead and scroll up and down here. So as you can see at the bottom here, we have some paragraph text. We have a start here button, and then we have the success text. And one thing you might notice is that the picture or the background here for the landing is going to take up 100% of the screen, no matter how wide or narrow the page is. And then the success text as well as the start here button will resize as we flex the website up and down, so it will look differently on mobile devices than it does on the full screen desktop version that we're seeing right here. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. The only thing that you'll need to participate in this tutorial is a simple text editor. So the text editor that I'm using is called Sublime Text, which you can go ahead and download for free. Just go to sublimetext.com or do a Google search for Sublime Text, or you can use any other text editor. So once you have your text editor, you'll want to create an index.html file and a style.css file, and then I'm going to have index.html open in my web browser as well, and I'm using Google Chrome. So here I have my text editor connected to Google Chrome, as you can see here, with the index.html file open in Google Chrome. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started at the top of the HTML document by laying out the basic foundation of the HTML sheet here. Okay, so the title of the website is just going to be full screen landing page, and then we'll drop down to the body section here and get started. So the first thing that we'll lay out is going to be a section class that we're going to call section class intro, and then I'll go ahead and close out the section. And then the next thing that we're going to add is going to be a div class. So both the section class intro and the div class inner that we're about to create is going to span 100% of the screen when we land on the page where you're seeing that full screen image. So then we're going to have here div class inner inside of section class intro. Okay, so I'm just going to drop down once we've closed out our div, and then inside of that we'll create a div class, another div class, and we're going to call it div class content, which is where this heading and button content will be nested in. Okay, so div class content, and then inside of there we'll have a heading 1 tag for the success text, and then we'll add our button. So just write a href equals, and then I'm not going to put a URL for now. I'm just going to keep us linked to the same page with the hashtag and write the starts here text, and then I'm going to give this link a class, or the a tag a class, and just call it btn, which is short for button. Okay, so now let's go over to the version that we've been working on here, and if we refresh the page, there we have our success text as well as the start here button. So the next thing that we'll do is just lay out the paragraph text here. So I'm just going to paste this dummy text in, and then I'll copy it and paste it 2 more times. Okay, so now let's go back, and if we refresh, there we have our paragraph text. Okay, so that's everything for the HTML for the entire tutorial. Now the rest of the tutorial will be in our style.css sheet where we'll lay out the CSS. So the first thing that we'll do is let's go ahead and import a Google font. So just write @import URL in parentheses and a single quote https://fonts.googleapis.com/CSS family, and then it's equals Montserrat. So this again is a Google font. If you want to use your own Google font, just do a Google search for Google Fonts, and you'll want to have the import URL and then the style that we'll add in a little bit when we have our heading 1 style. So that's going to be for the heading 1 text there. So let's go ahead and start off our style selectors here with referencing the HTML document itself, or some might call it a reset for the browser, and the body section of our document. So let's go ahead and do away with any inherent margin and padding by saying margin 0 and padding 0, and then let's give it a height and width of 100%. Okay, and then let's drop down, and I'm going to create a little space here so we're not looking at the bottom of the screen. Okay, so the next thing that we're going to style will be the intro section class. So we'll reference that with a period for the class and then intro. And let's also give that a height and width of 100%. And then we'll give it a margin of auto. And now we can add the background image. So go ahead and just write background and then URL parentheses. And the URL for the background image that we're using is already uploaded to the internet. And the URL for that is https and then www.macintuts.com/wp-content/Hawaii.jpg. And then after the end of the parentheses, but before the semicolon, write no-repeat space 50%, 50%. And that will center it on the page. Then the next thing we'll need to do is give it a background size. So if we refresh it here, we're not going to see it show up just yet. Oh, that's because we need to add our style sheet here. That's my fault. And that's why we're not seeing the padding and the margin there. So just go ahead and link the style sheet, style.css, to the HTML document. Okay, and now if we refresh, there we have the margin and padding gone, and there we have our background image. Okay. So now let's go ahead and add another style here, and we're going to say background size cover, since we want it to cover the whole screen. Then we're going to say display Okay, so now we have the whole image fitting into the screen with background size cover, but we need to get rid of that space at the top. So let's go ahead and say display table, and then we'll write top 0. So there's 0 space between the intro class and the image and the top of the web browser. Okay, so there we have our image taking up 100% of the screen whenever we land on the page. Now let's drop down and style the inner class. So what we're going to do with the inner class here is we're going to make everything in our content display in the middle of the page. So just write display table cell vertical align middle, we'll give it a width of 100% and then max width none. And now if we refresh, we'll see the content here displaying in the middle of the page, but it's still pushed off to the left-hand side. So now we want to drop down to the div class content, and we'll center our content on the page here. So just write dot content, since it's a class with the period, versus a hashtag for IDs, and we'll say max width 500 pixels, and then margin auto. Then we'll say text align center. Okay. So now let's check on the finished version here, or the version we're working on rather. And there we have our text and button centered, but now let's style the heading 1 text. So write dot content h1. We'll give it that Montserrat font family here from the Google Fonts with a backup font or fallback font of sans serif. Then we're going to give it sort of an off-white color here with the hex value of hashtag or pound F9, F3, F4. And then let's increase the font size to 500%, which the inherent font for Google Chrome is 16 pixels. So it's 16 times 5. And there we have our success text. And the last thing that we'll do to the success text is make it all caps. So let's write text transform uppercase. And now we can drop down to our button. So we'll change this start here link into a button. So let's go ahead and reference that with .btn. And without it being in any order, let's go ahead and give it a border radius here. And we'll just give it a border radius of 25 pixels to give it a nice rounded feel to the button. And then we'll give it its color for the text of white, which is just FFF. Then a font size of 135%. And we'll need to create some padding around the text to create the outline for the button. So we'll give it a padding of 15 pixels top and bottom, and 20 pixels left right. So you really only need 2 different values here, but I'll just do all 4 because we know it's top right, bottom left when we do all 4. And then we'll give it its border. So border is going to be solid white, and it's 2 pixels thick. Okay, so let's refresh, and there we have our start here button border displaying. Next, let's just take away the underline from the start here text, so text decoration none, and then let's make it uppercase. So text transform uppercase. Okay, so let's go ahead and refresh, and there we have our button looking just like the original except for the size of the border when we hover over it. So let's drop down and say btn:hover, and then let's change the width of the border. So I'm just going to write border solid white, or hashtag FFF, and then 3 pixels. And now it's going to be 1 pixel wider than the size before we hover over it. Okay, so the next thing that we'll do is let's just drop down to our paragraph text here and make the paragraph text a little bit larger and spaced out here. So we'll give it a font family of sans serif. and then a font size of 122%. And then we'll give it a line height to separate it some of 190%. And let's give it the newspaper feel with straight lines for our paragraphs with text align justify, and a margin around it to create some space off to the sides of 3%. Okay, so let's go ahead and refresh with our new paragraph layout and sizing, and that's looking much cleaner, and it takes up a good amount of space so we can scroll the whole landing page image up to the top without seeing any of it before we scroll back up. Okay, so now as you can see, when we size it down to about 768 pixels, the success text as well as the Start Here button are resizing for the mobile version or version that you might see with an iPad, for example. So let's go ahead and add a media query here. So the version we're working on will also resize the text, the button, and will change the size of the paragraph text at the bottom. So we'll reference this with a media query called @mediaScreen and in parentheses max width 768 pixels, and then open and close your swirly brackets, and now we can add our style selectors here. So the first one we'll do will be the success text with the heading 1 tag. So just write font size 250%, and that's about half of the original size at 500%. And if we refresh, there we have the smaller success heading 1 text. And now let's go to the Start Here button by referencing it with the btn class, and we'll change the font size to 110% down from 135%. And now let's just make the padding a little bit smaller. So we'll just have padding 7 pixels top and bottom, and 15 pixels left and right. Okay, now let's refresh, and there we have our smaller and narrower button. And the last thing that we'll do is let's just size down the paragraph text. So I'll reference that with the P, and we'll give it a font size back down to 100% or 16 pixels here in Google Chrome, and a line height of 160% down from 190%. Okay, so now we can go and check out our finished product here, because that does it for all of our HTML and CSS and completes our success starts here full screen landing page. So I want to thank you for sticking around. Remember to subscribe and like the video. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next tutorial.